First of all, thank you, Michael, very much. Are you unmuted, Michael, I hope? No, okay. Thank you, Michael, for hosting and also for all your help throughout this exhibition. And for those of you who don't know him, Michael is the gallery manager of the Providence Art Club, and he's also an art historian and speaker. I've taken some of his classes. He's really good at what he does. He's also an artist and an art appraiser, and he's a social media whiz. And he's an all-around positive force in the arts in Rhode Island and in Southern New England. So thank you, Michael. And thank you, everybody, for coming to this. It's a totally new experience for me, very strange. I'm a boomer, but I'm not a zoomer. So I'll just start right in. And well, actually, let me just take a moment and say thank you for being here, everyone. And the show was originally planned for May of 2020, but it was postponed because of COVID-19. And for me, having the exhibit to work toward through the pandemic was a little like a promise, and a promise that things would get better. And thank goodness that here in the United States anyway, we've emerged from that dark tunnel. And in a stroke of very good luck, the opening of the show coincided with a lifting of restrictions. So not only was it an opening, but it was also a very longed for reunion for family and friends, and a real celebration. And thanks to all of you who traveled to come to it. And how great that we can do this Zoom, because those of you who couldn't travel or were too far away can join in with me now. Bear with me. This is such a. I'm more of a visual person than a speaking person, so forgive me if I need to stop and grab a breath. I wanted to also thank all the people at the art club who worked through those 15 difficult months, keeping things going. And it really helped all of us to keep the faith. And the title of the show, Out of Many One, came to me early this year, like around in January, for probably obvious reasons. I was thinking about E pluribus unum, out of many states, one union. And it just occurred to me as I was thinking about that important idea that it also could refer to mosaics, and out of many pieces, one work, and then out of many works, one exhibit, and out of many days, one year, and out of many years, one life. I mean, it all started to kind of just build on itself. And so I'm happy with the title, Out of Many One. So let me just say that I'll be a little bit talk heavy in the beginning as I give some of my background. And then once we shift over to the works in the show, I'll kind of let the images do their talking. Okay, so let's see. This gives you a sort of snapshot view of most of the works in the show. And I like the way it looks on the screen because it's a mosaic in and of itself. If you were unable to make it to the gallery, I include a short video here. It's like less than a minute. And it gives you a sense of the beautiful Mary Castelnovo Gallery at the Providence Art Club, and the way it feels to have these pieces all together was very, very intense for me and wonderful. To have them talk to each other, to have them installed with lighting that gave shadows, and to see people look at them and turn away and come back and look again. it was a very moving experience for me to have. This is my first solo show, so it's a completely new experience for me. As we round the bend here, I took this video. I didn't realize that that would happen, but it did. So you can look on the side. And the last two pieces are on that inside wall. So there you have that. Oopsie. Okay, so probably the most asked question during this show has been, how did you get into mosaics? And I don't have an easy answer for that, except that probably the portal was through Italy. And Italy has been a big part of my life since I was in high school. And it kind of was the first step towards getting towards mosaics. The picture on the right here is from Pistoia, Italy, which is outside of Florence. And I lived with a family there one summer in high school and began to learn the language and really get an appreciation for the art. And it kind of got the bug. In 1978-79, I spent a semester in Florence, Italy, at the at Middlebury School there, and I was studying Italian and art history. And another way that my life was changed through that semester was one of my classmates was Frank, and 10 years later we would get married. That was a pretty good side effect. So this pairing, I just wanted to illustrate how the most humble kind of cobblestones, that beautiful, beautiful color, and then also the glittering interior of the Duomo. They were both a part of my being introduced to incredible art. I also studied in Fiesole, which is the hill town above Florence, and I took my studio art courses there. It was a master's program that they offered. I was allowed to take in printmaking and life drawing. And the piece on the right is one of my first, I'm just going to exit out there. Yeah. The piece on the right is one of my first etchings that I made there. And it has a story with it, which I like to repeat. My kids have heard it. My Frank has heard it, but I'll say it again for you, which is that I was having a really hard time starting. And what you do is you have a zinc plate and it's covered with sort of this sticky, waxy material, and you have to take a stylus and make your design in it and then put it in a plate of acid. And I was just feeling like it was all so permanent. I didn't want to start, and I was very hesitant. And so I was talking to the teacher, and he said, well, let's just go for a walk. And we went around this beautiful garden, the gravel pathways, and we sat down, and he said, here, let me have the plate. And he took it, he turned it upside down, and he smashed it into the gravel. And so you can see all these lovely swirling marks on the plate that would later be etched in with the acid. And it was a wonderful lesson for me, you know, basically saying that I was being way too cautious, and that I could dive right in, and that all marks could be beautiful, and that I didn't have to be so careful. So that stayed with me a long time. But as you can also see, I was nowhere near being a mosaic artist. I was working in line, and I was working in black and white. So after Florence, I went back to Middlebury to finish up. I had my senior show. This is an aquatint print that I made of the town of Middlebury. And I had my senior show. I also did a mini thesis for my Italian and art history part. My teacher, John Hunnisack, was a wonderful advisor, and I did something about Bernini. And he wrote a play, and I had not been really read before, so I read it in Italian, and it was really a fun project, his theatrics with his fountains and all. So as soon as I graduated, I got back to Italy as fast as I could. And my first job out of school was in Venice. And I was to be a translator for this international photography symposium that was taking place there. If Patrizia is on the call, on the Zoom call, hello, Patrizia, this is where you step in. The translators were given, as pay, they were given a room, a place to stay as payment. And so when I arrived at the address, I learned that my room was in a nunnery, and it was, you know, a little single bed with a cross on the wall, and it was closed up tight at midnight. And so before very long, I really understood that I wasn't going to be able to stay there, and I moved in with my friend Patrizia, and we've been friends ever since. And it's really makes me happy that she's here with us today. I worked with some pretty cool photographers, Mary Castelnovo, Pedro Mayer, and Lucas Samaras, and had a lot of fun in Venice, and got better at the language, and just was using my eyes all the time. This is an aerial view of Venice, which just gives you a sense of how fantastic it is. It's just hard to believe. And it also occurs to me that it kind of looks like a mosaic. This is San Marco, the main square, and it is adorned inside and out with mosaics. So after that first job in Venice, I moved to New York City. And the only real mosaics I was exposed to there were in the subways. They still weren't exactly a big deal, but all the signs were wonderfully done. And it was pretty grimy in the subways, but anyway, this one on the right here was an early decorative piece, and it was by an artist named Laura Bradley, who would come to play a big role in my understanding and learning of mosaics. I had lots of jobs in New York, and one of them was the frame store, and one of them was the school, and I spent probably 8 years on and off at the Andre Emmerich Gallery, and I got to know a lot of artists, made a dear friend, Howard, who's also here today, thanks. And again, lots of parties. And I, let's see, that was in the 80s, things were pretty flying high. And I re-met Frank, and we were married in 1988. I had Julia, and after he finished medical school, we decided to move to Rhode Island. Okay, so we landed in East Greenwich, up the street from this church, St. Luke's. The girls and I, and Frank to a certain extent, became members and became very much members of the community there. And they knew I was an artist. I did some projects there, and the minister approached me at one point and asked me to make a mosaic for the atrium. And I said, I'd never made a mosaic before. I don't know how to make a mosaic. And he said, oh, you can figure it out. So I said I'd look into it and do some research and get back to him. And he failed to tell me that it was supposed to be 5 by 7 feet, which was the full height of the atrium, wall. And that was a big undertaking for someone who had never done it before. This is when I went to the local bookstore. This is before internet. And I sat down on the floor of the bookstore and just looked through every book I could on mosaics. And the one that I was particularly attracted to was by Laura Bradley. And she was the one from New York City, the subway picture. And I wrote her just cold without knowing her at all. And she lived in New York City and also in Italy. And she was unbelievably kind and helpful. And I asked her to help me with the budget and to figure out, where to get some materials. And she just very graciously led me through that, which was invaluable. She introduced me also to a man named Costante Crovato, who was a master mosaicist. He started the school in Spilimbergo, Italy, which is north of Venice. He lived in Yonkers. Frank and I would go down to get materials and speak Italian. And it was really, really a wonderful connection there. He was very skeptical initially of what I was doing for a first-time mosaic project, but over time, he really became a great supporter. And when the project was going on longer than I thought, he was the one that said, mosaics have their own timeline. The church will wait. He was pretty cute. So some of the other places I went for research at RISD, the museum, they have a couple of Roman mosaics, which are beautiful. And also the Worcester Art Museum has a fantastic mosaic floor, early Roman floor. And so with Laura's help and encouragement, I decided to go forth. And these were some of I was supposed to illustrate a passage from Luke, which says, launch out into the deep and let down your nets. And it was after the fishermen had gone out many times without success and were told, try again. And in fact, they had full nets. And that was sort of the idea of helping us go forward with the renovation project of the church without really believing we had enough to go on, but we had to go on sort of faith that the fish would be there. And so these are my initial drawings, and I went on to create a final panel that, instead of using the Christ figure, I used in the right-hand one, you can see the sun. That was sort of like the main source of energy and life. And then the underwater part became very important in terms of life and the fishers of men, is what they say. Okay, let's see. So my upstairs guest room became my studio, and I worked on it for over 2 years. Just to give a sense of scale, there's Anna and Julia on the left, and that's one of 3 panels that were installed in the atrium. And let's see, I wanted to tell you that I think one thing I had going for me was a beginner's mind. And even though I had never done this before, I learned with great pleasure. And it was the materials themselves gave me the confidence to complete this work. It did take a long time. There were over 100,000 pieces we figured out. And the entire 3 panels came to 350 pounds. And it was an extraordinary collaboration with the workmen to get it into the wall. And on the left here, I'm covering up the seams, and they had to be bolted in these little open areas and then covered up. And there's the final product. And on the sides are those people who gave money to help with the renovation. So this was really a way of saying thank you to them. I wasn't going to, but in the very end, I included my my initials and the year. And the sun on the top part of the water there was made to look like DNA. And that was sort of the whole idea of life. All right, so another kind of pivot. Let me see where I am. After the installation, as a kind of prize, my family and I went to Ravenna, which is really the capital of mosaics in many ways in Italy. There are lots of different mosaics in different wonderful places, but Ravenna it's saturated with them. So that was our first stop. And I include this picture just to give you a little bit of a sense of what I learned about mosaics beyond what I had done for the church in East Greenwich. This was a church from 400, the year 400. And the exterior is so plain. And if you kind of go back in time a little bit and think about what it must have been like, there were obviously no lights, no electricity, no television, no books, very little reading, very little pictures. So it was a very, different kind of time to be alive. But when you go inside this plain building, it opened onto this fantastic interior, which was completely covered with mosaics, completely united with the architecture. And you can understand how it had a powerful effect on people to enter. It was almost a spiritual experience just to enter into this area. And the walls almost become weightless and luminous, and it has sort of a psychological effect on you. It was just very, very powerful. Teams of workers would put this together. There was usually a master mosaicist that was in charge of the design, and then he would have teams of people helping him install. This would take 10, 20 years sometimes. These are just some of the details to give you an idea of like the design and the mastery of the material, the beauty and simplicity of it. And also think of it lasting all these years. This is another church in Ravenna called San Vitale. And it was sort of one of the instruments of the Byzantine capital in Constantinople. They sent their directions to make this church into sort of a propaganda piece in a way, you can say. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian and Empress Theodora, they never were in Ravenna, but they wanted to make sure that that people there knew that they were the rulers. So once again, you enter in from this very bland exterior into this rising interior that's absolutely aglow. You can, and some of the imagery is Bible stories. So it was a way that people could learn about the Bible, and yet it was very much about power as well. but some of the design qualities I just love. I love them. Here are the emperor and empress. They stare down at you and really make it known who's in charge. The decoration on the empress is all mother of pearl. And even though it's very simple, in a way, the outlines of the eyes, and it really does the trick. Plus they're massive, so that when you're down below looking up, you can really see them, and they're way above you. It was in Ravenna that Frank and I went into this funny little shop and a hardware store and bought my first real instrument called the hammer, for the hammer and hardy to cut stone. Brought that home with us. That was in 2002, that trip, and it wouldn't be for another 10 years or so that I started making mosaics again. After the one for St. Luke's, I was kind of mosaiced out, and I had other things that I wanted to do, including writing and things with my family. So I really didn't continue it, but then I got back into it. And in, I don't know exactly when it was, I think 2016, I was very lucky to move into this mill building in Pawtucket with my friend Jess, who is also a mosaic artist. So the exterior is rather simple, and then my studio interior is filled with these colors. These are the smalti, which refer to the glass. It's made in Italy, and it comes in a gazillion colors. I have some, but let me see. This is the molten glass, which is made in all these different colors. And on the right is called they pour them out and make these plates. They're called piastre, sometimes called pizza, and then they're broken into the smaller pieces. This is one vast library of glass in Venice at the Orsoni Center. This is my stone collection. So where the glass is referred to as smalti, everything else is referred to as tessera. It's kind of a generic term, and it's sort of everything that covers the surface of a mosaic. So that's my work table. Some of the tools of the trade. That's the hammer I bought in Ravenna. And on the right, it's called a hardy. It's the half chisel on the top. And Frank embedded it in a tree trunk for me. That just gives you an idea of how you're supposed to hold the hammer and cut these tiny little pieces of stone. It's rather difficult. It's a heavy hammer. You're supposed to really let it fall and do the work for you, but you have to hold it in such a way. And believe me, there's lots and lots of stuff on the floor at the end of a day. These are the various adhesives I've used. A lot of people use different ones. And in a segue to other kinds of adhesive and glue, I turn to my fellow Rhode Island mosaic artists on the left. This is by Jess Regelson, my studio mate. And on the right, Ouija Morris, who's also an artist who lives in Providence. And they both came to my opening on the right. Jess is on the right and Ouija's on the left. And, you know, it's such a tiny sort of side medium. Not many people make mosaics, that it's a very wonderful community, very generous. Everyone's very helpful and open and supportive of one another. And that's meant the world to me. Jess has been doing this for 20 years or so, and maybe more, right? And so she really had huge amounts to teach me, and I thank her for that. So now this is where the works start to, do their talking. Just this, I started showing with the Pawtucket Arts Collaborative, and I would be included in group shows there sometimes. And this was a piece that gives you an example of what I was doing 10 years ago, 8 years ago. So the surface is completely covered and the materials kind of come out a little bit, but basically cover the whole surface. This was a piece I did during a rather dark time in my life. And, but again, there's no grout. I don't use grout, which would make, you'd have to have it be flat. So I really emphasize the different heights of the smalty, and it catches and reflects light differently. And that was quite an experiment for me. I love that piece, even though it was all black. This one, without knowing it, I made it after my mom died. It kind of became a place where I took my emotions about her, and it became a picture of the river of her life. And it really consoled me quite a lot to work on it. And I became much more aware of how mosaics could hold emotions for me. This is another piece from the earlier period, and it's just using a certain palette and just the 2- and 3-dimensional qualities that the tesserae offer. And once again, it's this complete covering of the backboard, as is this one. Before my mother died, I gave her this red mosaic on the left, and the stripe became a very important element in a variety of works for me. And this one has 8 gold pieces in the middle, and they represented my family. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and my parents. Together we all made 8. And to see them sort of stacked up like that, and then embedded in a background, just was very meaningful for me. A space, the stripe began to feel like it was something like a core, and it was protected, and it was together, and it was waiting, and it was sort of precious. And so that sort of stuck with me through some of my other pieces. As you can see, there's gold on the left, and then on the right is slate. In terms of the show now, this is the first piece chronologically that I made, and it continues in the tradition of this flat surface, not flat in terms of relief, but just covering the whole surface of the backing board. And then I moved into beginning to open things up a little bit, letting things become a little more airy, and letting the smalty kind of take on a little bit more life, a little bit more animation, became a little bit more playful. And I kind of went with that idea, opened things up more. They really began to be individuals, and I would literally have little conversations back and forth with each piece. And this one, on the very top, you can see that the green sort of grass area was, I was trying to push the medium beyond the backing board so that it could sort of extend into real space. And then on the bottom side, I don't know if you can see it, but there's sort of this cleft, and that gave it another sense of dimension as well. Sometimes the backing board was what made, which gave me ideas for things. And we have a friend who's a carpenter, and he made the backing board for many of my pieces. And I would just sit and sort of live with the backing board plain before I would begin to get an idea of what I wanted to do. And once again, Italy comes into play. I've always loved arches. It's a big theme in all of my artwork. And so I started just experimenting. And this is just gives you an idea. I sort of reached for that stripe, first of all, but I didn't know if that was going to work, and was already sort of feeling like an arch, like a sacred space. And so I didn't want to mix my metaphors. As you can see, I work on, not on the board, but on my work table. And I just sort of play, moving things around, making the design, trying to figure out what's going to work best, what feels right. And before I use any kind of glue. And so I had just come back from a week in Maine, and that horizon line was always there. And it was very inspiring to see that constant horizon throughout the day at different times. And so that's what filled my arched window as I began to do the next one. The moon was a difficult thing to figure out. I did finally. And so you can see the inspiration. This one takes the next step of opening up the pieces significantly and showing the background. This one was inspired by an artist named Alma Thomas. I went to Northampton to visit my sister Sarah, and we went to the Smith College collection. And there I was just taken by this painting by Alma Thomas. And it was so much a mosaic, these dabs of blue on pink field. I loved it and wanted to sort of do one in homage to that. I'd seen things like those combinations in a mosaic, and I decided to give it a go. And I'd never really painted the backboard before, but that became an element for me. So I started sort of playing with how it might appear. But anyway, so that was the beginning of, really doing something very different for me, using the pink backdrop and then this sort of real animated pattern. The next piece was also a new direction, and it came after a trip to Italy again. Stones I collected there, and it's somewhat geographic, or like one of those maps that has dimension. And I just love the stone so much. It goes back to that same first palette of colors. So we went as a family to Basilicata and to the city of Matera. And this is a mind-blowing city. If you ever get the chance to go, you should. I'm just gonna. People lived in caves. anyway, so during the course of the time, I would slip little stones into my pocket and ask the kids to do the same. And on one particular walk, I said, okay, everybody just keep picking up these stones. I want to make a mosaic. So I came home with these 2 bags of stone. I was so glad to get them home and just started playing with them and moved them around till I felt it felt right. And then I would glue them down. This piece was completely, talk about animated. It was very spontaneous. I had absolutely no plan for it. I was cleaning the studio. I think Jess was in Virginia, or I'm not positive. And I was sitting on the floor playing with these beautiful, beautiful pieces of glass. And the idea came to me that they were indeed animated and started climbing the walls. And it's a piece that people seem to delight in when they come upon it. And there's a little bit of a debate whether it's climbing up or falling down. But it's something that gives me a lot of pleasure. And here you can see it in my studio. And also recreated in the gallery. And Michael was nice enough to let me put it directly on the wall. This piece is kind of an intense one. Right after that very whimsical one. Once again, it came to me by the shape of the board. And I had asked our friend, Mr. Mende, to cut me different shapes. And I had 2 of these shapes and I couldn't see anything else besides the tower. So it sort of felt as though I had no option but to do it. And it became a great experiment in capturing this moment in time. The next slide does have a photograph of the explosion in one of the towers, and just as a little warning. But it was a picture that I worked from and with, and it kind of really grounded me in what I was doing, because it was a terrible thing to look at. And so why was I making a piece of art out of it? And that became the whole thing. It became sort of this look at this and look away, and look at this and look away. And the power of being involved with an inanimate object that had such emotion was a very transformative experience for me. And so I stuck with it. And when it came time to install in the gallery, Frank had the brilliant idea of putting this other piece that I made called Savings to its right, because it reminded him of the memorial for the towers. And it's kind of a nice somber piece next to it. And they kind of work well together. And it dawns on me too that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the attacks, and it's very intense. But I think it's in all of us, that experience that we went through, as one day this pandemic will sort of stay with us. It's not very far away, but we have gone beyond it. I like the shadow on this one as well. And it was really moving to see how people responded to it that hadn't seen it before, as they came around the corner. And sometimes they didn't see it right away. And then when they looked at the title, which is 11 Days Had September, it would dawn on them. And then some people cried and some people turned away. And it was wild for me to be able to see all these different emotions in the room. And it's the best part about the experience for me, was really seeing people moved. This is a small piece that I made, really wasn't intended to go with the 9/11 piece, but it was about, again, that gold stripe and sort of protecting protecting something that we value. This is a tiny sidetrack to an earlier piece that now lives in Barcelona, my friend Debbie, if she's watching. And it sort of shows me a little bit of my fascination with trying to describe fire in an artistic way. And don't want to run too late, sorry. So this is one of the last pieces. And it was inspired by the window in the gallery itself. And also by a piece that Frank and I bought of a Madonna and Child, and our same friend made the little shelf for it. So this was sort of a replica of that very beautiful shape. And then it stood across from this beautiful window. Went through a series of variations. The picture on the left here shows you, and I've decided, nope, don't like it. Just tipped it, all of the pieces came off. And then this last one is sort of a jumping off place for me into the future. It really becomes an amalgamation of so many things I learned as I prepared for this show, and also harkens back to that first idea of my printmaking teacher smashing my plate in the gravel. Just let it go, let it be. You don't have to get precious about anything. It's based on a Roman mosaic, an early Roman mosaic, which was a floor piece, also called the Unswept Floor, and sort of an incredible effort. And also, I think, was something of a inside humor for the mosaic artists, who must have been incredibly bored after doing lots and lots of squares and diagonals and just abstract. I think that they did this with tongue in cheek. And anyway, so this piece evolved over many months, and finally I would get down to it. This is just a quick little way of saying that this has become a way I see. When I look at my pictures, I think, oh my goodness, I'm beginning to see everything as if it were a mosaic. And in fact, that's sort of what happens. Everything becomes a mosaic. This I include just to say, what will I discover next? What will I see? These are some garden steps that I've made based on early designs. This speaks for itself, just my involvement with the art club. And that's where I'll end. I'm sorry if I ran a little over, but I'm done. Thank you, everybody.
That was great. Thank you so much, Sandra. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I love all the art history, and it's great to learn more about your background and see all those great inspiration shots and everything. Really, really fun. So I will start. We have a bunch of questions, so I will start going through them. Let's see. Okay. So Nick Miles, who is in the chat, also, you probably know Nick from the art club, but he also lived in Italy for a while. And he was asking which art school you attended in Florence.
Well, it was in Fiesole, and it was an American school called the Villa Schifanoia, but it was related to, don't remember the school in the States it was related to. Sorry, Fiesole.
And then Anne-Marie asked, in Ravenna, what is the main light source on those mosaics, and like how bright are they inside those spaces?
Well, the beauty of it is it's still pretty natural light through the openings, the windows that are created. I never went there at night, so I can't speak to that, but a very, very natural light that comes through various openings in the walls, windows.
Andrea said your pieces are beautiful, first of all. And then you talked a good deal about your backboard, but what is there like a specific type of wood that's used? And then she asked if you could talk more about the size of the smalty.
Yeah. The backboard, you can use a number of different materials if you're going to work outside. And with that very large piece I did for St. Luke's Church, I used something called mud board, which is sort of a medium density fiber content. It doesn't warp. It doesn't, mind getting wet if it's an outside piece. I also use just pine and birch panels. You can use any number of things. The other question was the size of the smalty. Let me get a piece. I don't know if you can see me, but so can you see that?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like maybe the size of a fingernail. That's when you get them, when you order them, that's what the size they come in. And then I would say probably at least half of them need to be cut by hand, if not more. In this piece, I would say almost only a few of the pieces, like that green one and that blue one, are not cut, but everything else seems to be cut.
When you're working with your hammer and cutting and everything, do you have to wear like special gloves, and what kind of eye protection? How you must have to protect yourself so that you're not like chopping off fingers or something.
Well, I almost said that just for anyone who goes near those kinds of things. It's highly, highly recommended that you wear safety glasses. And I did in the beginning, but because I wear regular glasses, that sort of protects my eyes. I have cut my hands quite a lot. We have a collection of Band-Aids in the studio. You have to really use your hands. Your hands are your main tool. The hammer is very heavy. The nippers are quite facile, although repeated, you have to kind of take it easy. Can't work for hours and hours and hours on end.
That's great. Nancy Gosher-Thomas said, I love the stories of each piece. Do you begin with a story that you want to put into visual form, or do you let the work evolve into a story without really knowing where it's headed?
The latter, Nancy, that's a good question, because that's sort of why I like not gluing it down right away. It very much evolves and comes, it's sort of very organic and becomes something that I never started out necessarily intending. I like that approach, whereas with the mosaic at the St. Luke's, I had to draw it first, and it was always creative, but it was sort of more like filling something in, whereas this way for me feels like it's very one piece leads me to the next.
How often do you take the panel and just flip it over and dump everything that's on it?
That was something else I wanted to say. There were, amongst this slideshow, there were probably 6 bombs that I didn't include. They didn't work at all. So it's not like it always just works. There are plenty of things that I think is a great idea, and then it's like, oh, this doesn't look good. And in terms of turning it over like that, not that often. That's why I do it on the work table first. But the large piece, I really, I had to start over. So it happens occasionally.
That's great. Beth said that, Sandra, you said mosaics can hold emotions for me. The simple pieces with those middle stripes, are they all about your family? And how did the stripes come into being? Did you feel like that was a conscious decision to use the stripe as that sort of metaphor for family?
Well, in the first one with the gold pieces in the red, that was very much a conscious choice about my family. But it took on its own meaning after that and became just this sense of something precious that was protected and within. And when I see those now, I don't necessarily see my family. I just see something that is protected and within us all.
That's great. And then, of course, a lot of comments in the chat that are just saying beautiful work, great job, wonderful, wonderful, lots of compliments. Then Nick said, fabulous presentation. Have you played with the glass on glass mosaics, which become an alternative to traditional stained glass? Have you ever tried that?
No, I'd love to.
So that's your next project when you've recovered from this experience. That
right.
Patrizia said, marvelous, a perfect way to spend the beginning of a night.
It's midnight over there, yeah.
Let's see, yeah, lots of compliments. Beautiful, inspiring, so wonderful. Thank you. Such a wonderful talk. You were a born teacher, says Philip. I love seeing your evolution as an artist. Is there a tooth in one of your pieces? Do you take a lot of photographs to help you in your work? Do dreams ever inspire you? So a few questions from Philip.
Well, there is a tooth in this particular piece, and you can search for it. It's a baby tooth, and that might gross you out, but it is in there, along with a chicken bone and a nail and a lot of other things. It's in the bottom right quadrant, tucked next to a blue triangular piece. Anyway, so the dreams, no, dreams don't enter into my inspirations so much. But I will say that sort of daydreaming does. And just looking at the garden or the water, or the sun on the water, or and I think a lot of, when I can't sleep, I think a lot about mosaic. It's a really great way to distract myself and just employ my mind so I don't start thinking about other things like the pandemic.
Let's see. Sarah said, you are a wonderfully inviting speaker, my dearest sister. I learned a lot about this process and how you work. They are incredible pieces. Susan said, incredible and very deep to share where you went and with your creativity. Wow, so many nice comments in this. I'll send you a copy of this chat, Sandra. You have to print this out.
That would be nice. Okay.
Gorgeous mosaics, and I loved hearing you speak about your work, Sandra. That's from Beth. Susan said, thank you very, very much. Very, very inspiring. Allison said, was fortunate to see the show in person. This is such a wonderful opportunity to learn more about mosaics and the stories around your pieces. Thank you. Love this, Sandra.
All right, good. Thank you so much, everybody. Really, really so nice that you'd spend your dinner hour with me. I hope I didn't keep you all too long, but okay. Really, really fun to see everybody's face. Thank you so much.
Did you want to do a couple more questions, Sandra? There's a couple more at the bottom.
If there are, sure. I just don't want to go over my time.
Oh, that's okay. I think that's fine. I loved your freedom you had as you developed with Andamento. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Andamento is one of the, well, first of all, it's a Italian word which means sort of the motion or the going forward, and it's a way that mosaic artists kind of shape the way your eye travels and the way a mosaic moves. And I haven't used it tremendously as I was sort of trying to show that shift from a very sort of static surface to a more lively one. And this piece probably captures the more lively Andamento more than any of my other pieces. And that's what I hope to do more of as we go forward. Is that enough of an answer?
That's a good answer. So I would also say thank you to everyone for coming tonight. Really appreciate all being here. Very nice Very nice feedback. Great feedback. What a positive chat. Excellent. And excellent job to Sandra. Wonderful
Thank you.
presentation. Fascinating. I learned a lot and I thought it was great. Everything from art history all the way up through your experience in putting this show together. And then everyone, again, please do come see it in person. If you are local, even you Rhode Islanders who don't want to drive, from Newport to here, please do. We will be here until Friday with the show on. And like I said, Sandra and Nancy are going to make themselves available tomorrow evening, Wednesday, from 5 to 7 p.m. So if you'd like to come after work, you can come then. And you can see both Sandra's show and the other exhibitions that are up and talk to Sandra and see these great pieces in person. So I guess my last question for you, Sandra, would be, what is something that you're really looking forward to doing next, whether it's mosaic or not mosaic?
So many things. I guess really one thing I enjoy is weeding.
You have plenty of that in your future, I think.
It's so mindless and lets your thoughts wander as you do something that's somewhat constructive, but not very taxing. And so I actually, during this whole period, last 3 weeks where the show's been up and I've been very busy, I keep looking at my weeds in the garden thing. I can't wait to weed. But it's perfect also because it's the beginning of summer, and Rhode Island is a beautiful place in the summer, and I'll be going back to Maine, and I really look forward to going back to the studio. I haven't been there for a while, so that'll be nice too.
Excellent. Great answers. Well, thank you all again for being with us, and thank you, Sandra. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Wonderful
Michael.
job and great talk. And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Michael.